Well, now the leader of the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage, has expressed scepticism about that Brexit deal negotiated by the Prime Minister, just announced by the Prime Minister. Mr Farage says the deal would keep the UK far too closely aligned with the European Union. The former member of the European Parliament also says he hopes this would be the beginning of the end of the European Union. Well, let's hear it from him himself. Mr Farage joins me now. Very good to talk to you, and a happy Christmas to you. Is this the kind of Christmas present you wanted from the Prime Minister? I'm guessing from what I said there, it's not.
Oh, look, I'm saying it's not perfect, and I'm worried that we're going to be too closely aligned to EU rules. And indeed, that's what the EU bosses are saying, that we will not be able to step out of line without them having the threat of imposing immediate tariffs. But look, that detail we'll discover in the next couple of days, all right? What I did think was good news was when Barnier said that the British had made no commitments on foreign policy or defence. That sounded like really quite good progress. And if we take the big picture, and don't forget, I've been campaigning for us to leave for 30 years, and this may not be perfect, but it's a very, very big day and a big step forward. So look, overall, of course, I've got concern over areas, but is this progress? Are we far better off than we were 5 years ago? Absolutely.
If you were an MP, would you vote for it?
Well, I'd need to see the detail, and I would not want to be bounced into voting for it in a couple of days having not read it. So I think what Parliament should do is have a vote in principle, and then in the new year, go through it in detail. In principle, given where we are right now, given that this has been the most divisive issue in British politics for 3 decades, if this brings some peace and some stability, then yes, in principle, I would.
OK, but what do you think? I want to ask you about the Prime Minister's language there, about the continuing connections with the European Union. When he talks, I mean, obviously he's used this language an awful lot, our EU partners and friends, we know that, but about being culturally, emotionally, historically and strategically attached to Europe, and that we remain collaborative with the EU over issues like science. And he also said our basic goals remain the same.
Yeah, I just shook my head. I don't agree at all. I think we actually have a much closer cultural affinity with many parts of the English-speaking world than we do with continental Europe. And that's one of the reasons, of course, in the end, that we voted for Brexit. Boris does his PC bit, plays up the pro-European side of things. He, of course, himself, until the referendum came along, had always been a supporter of the European project. But look, the truth of it is, whatever he said there, and I'd also question what he said about the fact we've got a Canada-style deal. We haven't. You have to take what Boris says with a pinch of salt. I think the truth of it is that the European Union itself is divided from north to south by a currency that doesn't work for the south at all, divided east to west culturally, and we're seeing the EU budget being vetoed and countries like Poland and Hungary very unhappy. And I think in the broader picture, Brexit is the beginning of the end of the European Union. I'm pro-European. I'm pro-Europe of sovereign states trading and being friends, not being run from Brussels.
But why does that matter to you? That it still seems the project goes on there. You want to see the disintegration of the European Union. The UK is out. You got what you wanted. Let the EU do what the EU's going to do.
No, I don't agree. I spent 20 years over there, and I saw the undemocratic nature of the way this project is run, the fact that it benefits big multinational businesses and damages all the small men and women trying to do their best. And as history teaches us, when Europe is happy and settled, it makes our lives easier too. And all I can see is conflict building up north, south, east and west within a European Union that frankly just wants to build this modern day empire with an absence of democracy. So no, it does matter to us. What happens?
I'm just thinking, though, Mr Farage, if you want to start a global campaign against tyranny, empire building and lack of democracy, is the European Union the most egregious example? Or what about the Chinese?
No, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. The Chinese are far worse than anything we see in Brussels. It's an utterly monstrous regime. It, of course, has brought us COVID and did its best to cover it up. And yes, and I'm worried about that because, Boris Johnson declares himself to be a Sinophile, the only Western world leader really standing up to China was Donald Trump. And if indeed Joe Biden comes into the White House, well, the Chinese Communist Party are getting a bit of a free pass.
OK, well, this is a wide-ranging interview. Let's get back then to the deal. What the Prime Minister's been saying about the European Union. We haven't got the details, as we've been discussing, fully about the deal. But what we do know is, and let me put these to you, there's another transition period when it comes to fishing, 5.5 years for the EU to adapt, and then renegotiations over the quotas. Independent third-party arbitration when it comes to disputes about things like subsidies and level playing fields. I mean, it still seems like the UK's going to remain pretty much bound by the EU's rules.
Well, that's the biggest worry I've got. We haven't yet seen the detail on what this arbitration committee is. I guess they're using that phrase because we didn't want to hear that the ECJ, was the final arbiter. There are two big problems that I have with this. I want to see the detail. The first, you're quite right. If we're going to stay aligned to EU rules and dare not step out of line because they have the sword of Damocles hanging over us that if we become too competitive, they'll slap tariffs on, well, that will be a huge disappointment. And on fisheries, I mean, to say to the British industry, it'll be 10 years after the country voted Brexit before we're even catching 2/3 of the fish in our waters isn't a good deal. For example, I mean, next year, can British boats in Devon and Cornwall land bluefin tuna? Yes or no? I don't know the answers to that. I'm hoping we'll get some detail over the course of the next few days. But the fishing industry, the coastal communities today are disappointed. Northern Ireland today is, of course, extremely disappointed. Those of us that want Britain to become competitive and global are concerned over what those level playing field provisions mean. And I share all of those concerns. But the point I'm making is that on the 31st of January this year and the 1st of January 2021, we've made the big historic break. The Brexit wars are over and there's no going back. And I will at least celebrate that this evening.
And is that the main benefit from your point of view, this sovereignty argument, the emotional side of it, the end of the Brexit wars, the end of the relationship? Because a lot of people and a lot of the debate during the referendum campaign was about the economic benefits. When and if do you think they will flow?
Well, you know what? When it comes to economics, you can get two experts on a panel. One will tell you we'll be poorer. One will tell you we could be a lot richer, and they both could be wrong. What is beyond doubt is that with Brexit, we get back something that we used to think was rather valuable, and it's called democracy. And it means that you can actually vote for people that make your laws and then vote for people who want to get rid of them. And the biggest problem with the European Union was any single piece of EU law that came into British law, there was nothing the electors could do in a general election or a parliament could do, even if all 650 of them voted against it. We'd literally given away the ability to govern ourselves. And Brexit makes us a free country. It makes us a democratic country. It doesn't, by the way, mean we'll get everything right, but it does at least mean we'll make our own successes and our own failures in the future.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that on the economic front, because, it's kind of been polarised into Singapore on Thames, Singapore on Sea, or staying very much like the EU, a bigger role for the state, huge investment in public services and following rules and regulations. I mean, do you tend towards, if I may term it that, the Singapore model, cutting the red tape, cutting the taxes, encouraging the investment?
Of course. I think, the whole idea of the European single market, the whole idea of a level playing field is anti-competitive and big state in its very nature. And it makes it much more difficult for small and medium-sized competitors to break into industries that are run by a handful of big companies. So for me, the economic vision of Brexit, well, number one, it was global because, let's face it, the Eurozone is only 15% of the world's GDP and it goes down 1% every year. So the future for trade is going to be outside Europe. But I want us to be on tax, on regulation, employment legislation, environmental law. I think we can legislate smarter and better and make this country far more competitive, than Germany or France and elsewhere. And if we get that right, then, the thought of Singapore is that we'd get money, hundreds of billions flooding into Britain from all over the world. And so the biggest concern economically is just how closely tied are we going to be to those European rules, and what's the arbitration process going to be? And if we have signed up to something that stops us from having the option of being Singapore, that will be a great shame.
OK. Always good talking to you, Mr Farage. Nigel Farage, thank you very much indeed.